Hey everyone, and thank you so much for coming out on this wonderful fall evening. Before I start, I want to just remind you that we're going to be having our annual community barbecue Friday night, 5 to 7, and I hope you all come back and enjoy your neighbors, hang out, see friends, and learn about some of the things that the town is working on. Tonight, we're going to be having a PowerPoint. Many of us will get up and explain different slides. The meeting's going to be moderated. Ryan Bjorky has volunteered to moderate the question and answer section. So the presenters will cover who, with introductions, why, the approval, support, and project needs and benefits, what and where, the system location and design, when, we will go over the schedule, how, we will describe the project cost, funding, and the revote article. And there's going to be more than ample time for question and answers after the presentation. And if you can't make it to the September 10th vote, you can request an absentee ballot from the town clerk. Either give her a call, stop in, you can vote in the office, or come right here on September 10th to the office and vote by Australian ballot.
8 to 7 p.m.
I want to make some introductions first, people who are going to be presenting the information tonight. We have with us Amy Macris, who works for Stone Environmental. She's a project scientist. We have Peter Lazarchuk, is the project engineer. Seth Jensen, he is one of, along with Tori over here, who is helping us manage the project through the Lamoille County Planning Commission. We have Jim Ryan, he's the chair of our select board, our wastewater committee. Alan Carpenter, select board and wastewater committee member, Bruce Wheeler. Committee member Linda Martin, and we have Bradley Horseman online as a committee member. I'm going to go, can we put on the slideshow, and I'm going to go over the timeline of how we got where we are today. Give you a little background. While that's coming up, the first slide, First, in 2018, the town plan identified installing community wastewater in Wolcott Village as priority implementation action for the select board. And for those of you who don't know what the town plan is, this is a plan that the planning commission works on with a diverse group of members. And it takes them about 2 years. They work on the town plans. It has a lot of information in there, but one of the things they set up are goals that the select board is supposed to try to achieve in the next 5 years. Our current plan is 2018 to 26. They're currently working on updating a new plan. They meet monthly on Mondays. This is required by the state to have this town plan. So, as I said again, the town plan identified this as a priority. So in 2019, the Wolcott was selected for a statewide community wastewater pilot program, which is set this, and then the select board authorized the wastewater committee. So we had the state wrote a grant, and they felt that Wolcott and Burke were two communities that should really do a pilot program to find wastewater solutions for their village. And that grant was funded through them. And in September of, 2022, the town was awarded the village ARPA grant of $2.65 million. In June of 2023, the Vermont DEC approved the preliminary engineering report that was designed through this grant. And it's on our website for review. It's a preliminary engineering report. In December 2023, the school board supported an MOU with the town to evaluate wastewater dispersal site at the athletic field. In January of 2024, the town was awarded a Community Recovery Vitalization Program grant. In early 2024, the Vermont DEC approved on January 17th, and the select board authorized on February 8th, the first phase of engineering design. June 2024, the town was awarded additional ARPA grants of $1.435 million, which fully funds the project. June 4th, 2024, the Wolcott School District voters approved granting an easement on the elementary school athletic field for community wastewater dispersal. And in June 11th, 2024, the town of Wolcott voters approved the bond article.
I'm Jim Ryan, Chair of the Wastewater Committee and Wolcott resident. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. It's a beautiful night. We have a full house here. Whether you're for or against, it's important that we have a public, open discussion about this, and that the intentions of both parties are good, and we hope that we keep everything civil. And we're really here tonight hoping to improve the town's future prospects. So why are we doing this project? I wanted to just add to what Linda mentioned. She mentioned the town plan of 2018, identifying this as a high priority. It actually goes back to 2005 through various iterations of the planning commission, various iterations of the select board, approved by both since 2005. And we had an attempt at doing this probably 10 or so years ago, but it didn't go anywhere. And it was, again, come up as a high priority in municipal plan. And the select board recognized it as a priority, formed this committee, and we started this work 5 years ago. One of the goals here, most important goal, is to sustain the existing buildings in the village, whether that's residential, commercial, or municipal. As we know, we had 3 floods in the village in the last year. We have a half dozen or so homes in the village that are up for FEMA buyout because they were just extensively damaged and didn't make any sense to rebuild. There are other homes that have tried to make their homes more resilient. When we talk about resilience, we're talking about making the buildings, the infrastructure as flood proof as possible. It's not 100%, but we're trying. That's what the town is doing, various flood resiliency projects in town. In addition to the buyouts, they're stone lining ditches, they're upsizing culverts, they're doing some of these projects. Right now, they're doing a floodplain restoration project on the Wild Branch. They're relocating Flatiron Road. We look at this project as one of those projects to make the village more flood resistant. We want to make sure that the vacant buildings in the village, and there are at least a half dozen of them, residential, commercial, old schoolhouse, the church, vacant MSI buildings, and private homes. And a lot of them are vacant because they have inadequate systems. When we get the system put in, the value of those buildings will increase, which will increase our tax base. We have a declining enrollment of students at the school. We're hoping to bring more families into town. And as part of that, we need more housing. With that, some of these buildings, we're hoping that we can have additional community spaces, like the schoolhouse next door. There's prospects of making that a cafe and also a historical society with renovations to the building, and that being hooked up to the new system. The owner of the Nazarene Church has asked the town on Front Porch Forum, what would the community like to do with that building? The owners asked us what we'd like to see. As far as water quality, which is one of our biggest priorities, we have the state DEC online here, Emily Hackett. They are funding the vast majority of this project through state grants. They recognize this as an important water quality project. When we have failed and flooded septic systems in the village, that we've seen again 3 times in the last year, these systems go underwater and they can contaminate well water, and they can also discharge pollutants into the Vermont River. Again, this is a flood resilient project, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But we're really trying to accomplish here is make the village more vibrant. If we do nothing, the village remains as it is. And as much as I love this town, we can do more in the village. And we want to make it more vibrant. That's Sept Jensen from the Memorial Regional Planning Commission.
Thank you, Jim. So since joining my planning commission back in 2011, I've been working very closely with the communities in the Wolcott County, as well as private individuals on issues from flood resiliency. I also grew up in the Memorial watershed near the Browns River in Westford, and I knew. Remember the 1995 flood? I was one of the scouts up at the Lake Eaton camp during the 1995 flood. Was evacuated. I understand there were quite a few impacts in Wolcott on the same time. So as Jim mentioned, this major piece of this project is flood resiliency and protecting the Lamoille River and groundwater quality. So the project brings with it many things that will improve flood resiliency for the village in Wolcott here. Just as a background, this is a picture, I think a lot of you are going to recognize it, an aerial photo from just after the July 2023 flood, and you can see the sediment still very visible. It was from several days after, but you can still see some areas where there was standing water. And damage to septic systems at that time and from other floods is contributing to some of the buyout requests. There's also impacts to groundwater wells. Most folks in the village are on individual wells. And all of that also impacts the property tax base of the town as a whole. So this project has built into it several major things to protect the community from that happening again. A major piece of that is that the new tanks that will be installed if the project is approved at the individual properties will be ballasted, meaning that they will be prevented from floating and flooding away. Other components will be flood-proofed to ensure that floodwater and groundwater cannot back up into the tanks, into the collection system, and ultimately into the homes. Probably the biggest thing is that this project moves the existing on-site leach fields, most of which are located in the rear homes closest to the river, out of the floodplain and up to a location that's about 100 feet above the flood level, even in a big storm like 2023. And that will prevent submerged septic tanks from potentially contaminating water after future floods, potentially both the river as well as groundwater. The system will also have numerous ways built in to prevent backflow from happening. So water will not be backing into homes from the septic systems, which was a big problem in Wolcott, as well as some of the other villages where most folks are on individual septic systems. Something that Lamoille County and Wolcott are ahead on has been that we have been able to build out a model of flood impacts along the main stem. We started, LCPC started building this back in 2015, and Wolcott, through a municipal planning grant during the last plan update, helped to expand this so that there was more data in Wolcott about what the river does at different flood stages. The town has been using that even before the July 2023 flood, but especially after, to inform infrastructure projects throughout the town. So it is being used to inform the size and layout of the School Street Bridge replacement just up here. The town has also been using it for planning how to best restore Flatiron Road, which I think you all know was washed out in last year, as well as to protect Flatiron Road from future flooding. And the town's also been using it for some other projects for floodplain restoration a little downstream. So the model also gives us some good information about the risks to the existing wastewater systems that are located in the village. And so we look specifically at the 3 town-owned leach fields that are in the service area. That's important to keep in mind, is that the town currently has 3 existing on-site wastewater systems that are owned by the town, responsibility of the town, whether you live in the village or in the hills. Those systems belong to you as a taxpayer and resident of the town. So those 3 leach fields are all located in areas that are vulnerable to flooding and erosion. The town office leach field is immediately next to the river and is the most at risk in a flood such as what we had in July 2023. It was under almost 5 feet of water. It is vulnerable even under smaller storms than that. And so what this project does for flood resiliency is moving those leach fields out of the flood hazard zone as well as erosion. I think that's something really important to keep in mind. The in addition to flooding more frequently, so moving more actively. And for some folks, that's as big of a risk, if not more so, from the actual height of the water. This project moves those leach fields up out of the floodplain to an area where even on a storm like we had in July of last year would still have 100 feet between it and the floodwaters, and is far away from the active streams. So that's an example of those town-owned leach fields. These are also risks under the current conditions that are posed to the private properties along the river that this project has the opportunity to address, so that the community and the folks in the village don't have to face those risks in this way anymore. Thank you.
Hi there, Peter Lazorchak, with Stone Environmental, the engineer on the project. As mentioned, there is a preliminary engineering report that was approved by the Department of Environmental Conservation in Vermont, and that was completed in June of 23. And that sort of guided our process for the recommended alternative that we've landed on that was approved by the select board. I'll just briefly kind of talk about the system, after the presentation. Additional questions can feel free to ask them. Next slide shows the service area, which essentially goes from 3791 Vermont Route 15 down to 4434 Vermont Route 15. And then up School Street out to 594 East Elmore Road, where the force main will go up the new town forest parcel and up to the school property where the disposal system will be located. Next slide shows what the disposal system up at the school will look like under the ball fields. Essentially, we're proposing a drip dispersal system. And the benefit of this is it slowly doses the wastewater into the sandy soils throughout the day through kind of picture irrigation piping. This is proven to be very effective treatment. And we have 30 feet of sand, the water table to provide wastewater treatment, which is really a beautiful thing for the community. Next slide, I think, shows sort of the various zones at the school. One of the nice things about this system is that because we have multiple zones, they can be isolated at any time to work on them or rejuvenate or repair as needed without putting the whole system down. Throughout the day, those various zones will get dosed at different times. It's rotating through those zones. Next slide. And in terms of project schedule moving forward, as everyone knows, we have a bond revote next week. And then we will be working through final design and engineering through 2024 and early 2025. Mid 2025, we'll be going through the permitting process and hopefully preparing bid documents and putting out for contractor selection. If all goes well, we're hoping to start construction late 2025, with the bulk of the construction happening in 2026. Back to you, Linda.
Yeah. This slide just kind of shows you where our funding has come from. I know there was a question of it was 4,424,000, why it changed to 4,718,000, and that's because when we received, the last ARPA grant of 1.45 million, one of the, things we had to do was we had to increase the contingency from 20% to 30%. That was what the state said you needed to do. And Emily is online and she had recommended that that's what they're seeing in other state projects that the state works on, the 30% contingency. And so we needed to increase that. But we still, with our funding, we're still fully covered with a 30% contingency. We received $400,000, $4 million, excuse me, from the state ARPA Village Wastewater Grant, $640,000 from the ACCD Community Recovery and Revitalization Grant, and $125,000 in the Clean Water Revolving Fund. We still have some funding pending out there. It's a Northern Borders Grant for $765,000, and we have been nominated by our senators and approved by the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee for fiscal year 25 for a congressional direct spending grant in the amount of $1 million. I won't spend a lot of time on this one. This is our warning for September 10th. Same warning as we voted on in June. We're required to have the same wording when you're petitioned to revoke that. Even though we don't need to bond any money, that's what we need to vote on. The last slide here is message from Governor Scott. The American Rescue Plan Act gave us unprecedented opportunity to strengthen our communities. I hope the folks who live in Wolcott will once again vote in favor of this wastewater project so the community can benefit for generations to come. Thank you. We're not going to open it up to questions.
Thank you guys for the presentation. So obviously the intent for tonight is it's an informational meeting. This is your chance to ask questions regarding the wastewater system. And hopefully, amongst the entire group that's here, we can get those answered for you. We would just ask if you want to ask a question, just raise your hand. I don't know all your names, so I won't be able to call you by name, but we'll recognize you. If you could just state your name because it is recorded. That'll help everyone else understand. Anyone who's online, you're on Zoom, so at the bottom of your screen, there should be some icon for a hand that you can raise. Between Dolan and I will try to make sure we recognize people that are online as well. The piece we would ask is because we do have a full house and we want to make sure everyone has a chance to ask the questions that they want to. If we have a finite amount of time, we have till 7:30, that one question at a time. If you've asked a question, we're going to move on to another person so they have a chance as well. If you have an additional question, we'll come back around once we feel like everyone has had their chance to ask theirs. Just ask people to be respectful. If you have comments regarding the system, this isn't really a time to debate about the system. It's a chance for you guys to ask these people who put all the work in relevant questions to the wastewater system. All right. So, Kurt, you have your hand up.
My name is Kurt Billings. I am on the select board and I'm opposed to this project at this time. I feel this is not going to help. It's going to be so financially burdened on us as a town that we're not going to be able to afford it. My question is, has anyone thought of what flood damage is going to happen? I have pictures here showing this road, the East Elmore Road, being totally washed out, the bridge damaged. We won't even put a bridge in for the children to walk from there to the ball field to the rail trail. Have you thought of what it's going to cost for the damages? I mean, Johnson put out 12 million last year. What's our cost going to be? And who's going to pay for it?
When you're asking for which cost, can you be specific as to what?
The damages.
Repair potential damages related to the flood?
Potential, I feel, is always going to be every year.
Would like to field that question.
I'm happy to talk about the benefit of this system.
No, I want to know who's going to pay for the damages.
It's built into the user fee, money put aside. and
So everybody in this town,
No, users. Those who are users, part of their fee includes, it's put aside in a reserve fund for repairs. I don't know where you get your stories about bridges and stuff that we won't even repair, but that's,
And I just address the piece too. So I've been assisting the village of Johnson with repairs and FEMA reimbursement for their wastewater treatment facility since the July storm. One thing to keep in mind is this project will be considered public infrastructure and therefore eligible for FEMA public assistance reimbursement, which is a process and not a fun process. But the damage to individual on-site systems is not FEMA reimbursement eligible. So if damages were to occur, I know Peter and Amy are working on designing the force main so that it's in as safe as the location possible. But if damages were to occur, those damages, because it's public infrastructure, would be potentially reimbursable through the FEMA public assistance process. Emergency pumping of tanks would also be potentially considered emergency operations cost for a public system, whereas on private systems are not eligible for that emergency cost. So it's not without risk. There's nothing without risk, but there's built-in ways to mitigate that risk with a public infrastructure project that are not available for private infrastructure projects.
Did you want to add something to that or?
I was just gonna add that the system in general, Sept mentioned, all the tanks will be ballast. We're talking about a low pressure 4-inch diameter force main that will be 5 to 6 feet below grade adjacent to the roadways. We're gonna, the V-Trans in the town are working to replace the School Street Bridge. That will allow that bridge to be much higher and more flood resilient. The force main will be on the down gradient side of that bridge, so it'll be well protected. And then there'll be shut off valve on either side of that if in case of emergency to isolate it. So
Thank you. Other questions?
Pete Cochran. I guess my first question is, whose idea or whose was it to use the school athletic field, recreation field as a leach field? And are those people willing to guarantee that we're never going to have a failure that's going to cause a problem with the school? Look around the state right now, not exactly the same thing, but Milton, North Country, Dawson Brook School, they're all dealing with different kinds of issues of contamination. Are you willing to take a chance? And in my mind, would probably end up shutting the school down. Very expensive problem. What other sites were looked at? Why not in your town forest?
Who would like to answer?
I can answer that one. So part of the work that we did back in 2019, 2020, 2021 was to kind of turn ourselves out inside out to try to evaluate properties around town, both owned by the town, owned by other willing private owners. And the elementary school was the only place where we found conditions in the soil and subsurface that were remotely suitable. We tried to dig holes up at the solar farm, it's not a gravel pit anymore for a reason. We looked at several other properties, both town-owned and privately owned, and this school is literally the only place where a system like this could be constructed that's safe and effective and has the right conditions. You have good instincts about the risk, but I will also say that there's a really good example if folks want to tour it. Some folks from the school board did tour it late last fall, down in Warren Village.
I've heard about that.
Yeah,
And to add to that question, the one in Mooring Village, does that serve the town or does that serve just the school?
no, it serves about 50 properties down in the village. That has a mix of septic tank gravity and septic tank pumping. And it goes to a pump station right next to the pitcher inn and goes then up the hill to the elementary school. It's been operating since 2004. It's almost 20 years. And we've been monitoring it since 2008. When we asked to tour in the fall, the principal was kind of like, visit. We never, we know where the septic tank is because we can see that, but how much of the field is actually taken up by the leach field? It's invisible, the kids play on it. And that system has performed really well for a long time.
Okay, that's in Mooring.
Yep.
Okay, that's not Wolcott.
It's
What
the
I
same-
guess my other part of this question was, is there somebody that's been involved with this design and everything that would actually guarantee the town that this will never have a failure, never have a problem?
That's the engineering of it, honestly.
Would you be willing to give a written guarantee?
Hold on one second. So what was your testing that you did to evaluate that site to say that it is viable? Just so people.
The testing that we did there was factor test pits, just like what we just did a month ago up at the elementary school. We did some groundwater monitoring wells. We've done a range of types of testing, some modeling to make sure that when effluent is released into the groundwater, it's not going to back up onto the field. And then some downstream monitoring to make sure that the surface water and groundwater are protected. It's the same permit program. We're trying to get a permit for the Wolcott system under, so the requirements to even get a permit are going to be very similar.
Mike, sorry.
I'm also on the select board, but just to piggyback off the question a little bit. So Seth, at last select board meeting, you talked about Senate Bill 213 that passed and will become, in force in 2028. Talking about permitting inside of the floodplain and how any development, storage material, storage, there's all of those things. So if you could speak on that for just a moment and how that may impact people who live in the village trying to be able to find a replacement system. And it actually, you kind of answered the question already, stating that really the only place in the town that can support that in this village is up there. So if you can't replace a system that exists in the village, what losing that housing may do to our tax base and what that may do to people who live in the hills, their property taxes as a result. I don't feel like that has been talked about enough.
So the bill you're referring to, starting in 2028, the state will have a permitting process for any new development. And that doesn't just include buildings. I think this is important when we throw around the term development. In zoning, permitting, wastewater development isn't just buildings, it's any stuff or change that happens on the land. And that can include excavation, that include changing how you use a building. But any of that is in what's called a state erosion hazard zone will need to get a state permit. Exactly what that will mean for existing buildings or replacement septic systems, those will be, exact rules will be developed through the rulemaking process. So I can't tell you exactly what those rules are going to be, but I can tell you that it will probably be harder than it is now. And So, and it will also mean not getting a permit from our local zoning administrator coming down the town office and then getting a permit from Montpelier. And so and that's starting in 2020. So that's the near future. If this project is built and folks are able to relocate their leach fields out of those erosion hazard zones, that will not be a question folks in the village need to worry about. And if that doesn't happen, there could be an extra layer of permitting on top of the existing state wastewater permitting. And that could impact, for example, and this is true of the wastewater permitting, a home and whether they can have existing bedrooms or additional bedrooms, whether someone could do something like put an in-law apartment in their home. In general, that is going to get harder to do with rule changes. Exactly how, as members of the select board, as members of the community, follow the rulemaking process. But certainly understand, and it will say, as homes and businesses are utilized less, the grand list does decline. The opposite is true. So an example I'll use from another community in the Warren County, the village of Jeffersonville, the old McGovern Granary. Some of you might have known it 10 years ago as a Ace Glass. Recently restored, renovated, actually about 50% of the floor area was removed. The area that was in that river corridor and the most at risk, but the renovations added $500,000 to the local tax base. So the same is true. You enable investment in your existing buildings, your tax base grows, everyone in the community benefits. Disinvestment, property values declining is the opposite thing. Does that answer your question? Yes, thank you.
Dave, I saw your hand on that, Jim.
Yeah.
I did.
Will there be a monitoring system at the leach field at the school? So prior to a big problem happening up there, wouldn't we be able to transfer the wastewater into tankers and rather than destroy the whole leach field, couldn't we just bypass it and take it somewhere else while the problem was being fixed?
Yes. There will be various alarms and controls that will notify the operator of problems. There'll also be part of the operation and maintenance will be periodic check-ins on the system. And yes, you're absolutely correct. If there's a problem, that would be the recourse would be to part of the O&M would be to have emergency tankers available on call for that sort of pump outage.
Dan, how many pumps are in this system?
Good question. So
And who's responsible for the maintenance? Are we gonna have to add the head count in the town so we have somebody that's on call to work on these pumps?
So at every property will be a combined septic tank and pump station. With a pump that feeds into the 4-inch low pressure force main. So it doesn't take a lot of energy to be pushing that wastewater out. They're not super expensive high head pumps or anything. And part of managing the system will be replacing those as needed.
Oh, yeah, that's normal winter care.
Sure, yeah.
And this is all grant money, right? All free?
Yeah.
And everything?
Well,
So
not to
what's
maintaining it.
What's the one for? That's it. In the article, the 1,400,000. What's that for? We don't need it.
We still have to
Even though
vote
I'm
on
getting
it
that-
because the original vote had it in it.
So can we?
So the
amend-
petition said they wanted to
We
revote.
can't
this.
amend the 1,400,000.
Now, that's what I tried to explain, that, we had the vote, we have the money, but because we were petitioned, we have to petition is to revote what we did last time. You can't change your word.
Stay right on that.
You have to stay on it. So I envision that, part of the user fees, the people that are on it, not the rest of the town, they have user fees. That we would hire a subcontractor. That's what Alan does for Cabot, Marshfield. We would hire a subcontractor who would come, I don't know if you,
They would come check on it and also with the state permit to make sure all the rules they add on there. You will get a permit that's probably like 30 pages long. You're gonna have to go through, do testing, do everything in that permit to meet that permit. And if it goes anything over the levels in that permit, the state will call you up and let you know. It's like, try to wait water by itself. If you get E. coli, the state calls you. And tells you have to go do a boil water dose.
well, that's if you're drinking water.
But they do that with wastewater, the same thing. When they review it every month,
So it will
they
be,
will.
we will hire a subcontractor to maintain our permit and the person checking. Town employees will be doing this. No, that's a good question. That's why we're here.
David, my question, I think you answered it, was who's paying for it? It's basically just the people on the system.
For the
So-
maintenance.
So what happens if half the system gets wiped out by another big flood? All the houses are gone, there's nobody on that system more. So the rest of the people pick up. I mean, you're looking at an expense that could double for somebody to pay. Are you looking at it saying, okay, now the whole town has to pitch in to pay for it? That's what I'm worried about.
We have not.
Okay, no, I'm just wondering if that's, wondering how that's gonna work if, half the houses get washed away and they don't come back on the system.
Well, I would envision the cost would go down with less people on it to a
You're
point.
still gonna have somebody that you have
You
to
will
pay to
still have to have
maintain it.
somebody. There'll be somebody.
And that's gonna be a continuous cost, and that's gonna go up every year, I'm sure, just like everything else. But I was just wondering how that was gonna work.
So. You've already asked a question. Anyone else that has a question? Eric?
Yeah, so if the town has 3 individual leach fields in this zone. If the bond weren't to pass and the town were to hook up those 3 fields for our buildings in the zone, is anyone looking at a cost what that would cost the taxpayers overall? Both the villagers and the building?
For replacement of the town.
Replacement of the 3 town leach, we've had, would there be grants or anything that would be free?
We've had discussions about, so there are two costs for this project. There's we call the capital cost, that's the cost to design, permit, build the system. That is covered by our grants. That's the big ticket number, 4.7 million. The other cost is what we call maintenance or service fee. That would be paid for by people that are hooked up, which includes a half dozen or so municipal buildings. We, as taxpayers in the whole town, would only have to pay for the municipal buildings service that is hooked up. Currently, we have 3 leach fields that we have to maintain and pump out in town. And if those fail, all the taxpayers are on the hook to replace those.
Right, those
Which would be tens of thousands of dollars each. So we're talking about maybe $100,000 if we had to replace all 3, which is a lot more money than the service fee at $3 to $6 per 100,000 of assessed value. So just think about that.
No, I think.
You're spot on. You're spot on. And that hasn't been discussed enough.
Upgrade systems for 3 different places through town, it would cost the taxpayers.
And you're removing the liability of damage to individual septics when these flood in a flood event, when everybody's hooked up to the town system.
And my biggest fear is that this building and the library can't even have a septic system on our own property because it's all ledge and there's no land. It's across the street, down by the river, on someone else's property. So if it fails, gets flooded, I don't know where to even start looking to put it.
Bill, you had to get up first.
Yeah, well, Linda just hit my point. I mean, when you leave tonight, if you look at the lot across the street here, that's where, this, over here,
Yeah.
across the street. That's where the septic system in Leachfield is for this building, the old school, and the library. And we can look at what's it gonna cost us? Well, I look at it, what's it gonna cost us if we don't? And I come up with a lot bigger price tag for the taxpayers of the whole town, not just the village. Because if this system, if the systems that support our municipal buildings get cleaned and get, closed down, where are we gonna go? What are you gonna do? I mean, you can play what if till the cows come home. But think about what this village might look like with a wastewater system. And then think about what this village is gonna look like if it doesn't get one. And you've got a picture of that right now, but it's just on the edge, waiting for the next storm. So if you want to risk that, be my guest, and we'll have to pay for it. And I think we're gonna have to pay a heck of a lot more. Plus, FEMA is paying for buyouts. FEMA wants this because they're tired of paying for buyouts. FEMA's gonna pay for the repair of Flatiron Road. We send a message to the governor and the FEMA that no, we don't want wastewater in our village. Good luck with getting their attention in the future when you need their attention.
So Linda, you brought up a good point with Steve Wolf. I live on School Street. You brought up a good point with lead. I'm assuming that you're running right down the center of the street or I'm not sure where you're proposing to run the line. But this whole street, as Linda mentioned, is lead. And you're running how deep? And are you blasting or what are you doing down through this town? Down through this street?
Part of our remaining design process will be to go through town and do lead probes and try to figure out where we can get best burial. And kind of pick our force main route based on that.
Yeah, there's no very many tree ground before you hit ledge. I just had to replace my whole leach field in my front yard because of the flood and it cost me a lot.
Yeah.
So I know where there's ledge and it's right on the surface of the ground. And it's gonna be very extremely hard to do it. And if there's blasting, I'm not sure what's gonna happen or how you get that lead, how you get the line through there or what it's gonna do to get it through. That's my question. Has anyone, I know there's contingency, but how much of the contingency is proposed for that or what's gonna happen to get that route done?
We'll take that as we go. I mean, we have carried some lead blasting in our current cost estimates. And as we develop our design and do more adaptations, we'll have more.
I actually have a question for you because you recently replaced your system. And we're test pits done, just because I'm a baby. What was the character of that backup? Was it really hard or were they able to kind of dig into it?
Some places are softer, other places like diamonds. So, yeah, you can say you could break some of it off, and some places, other places, they had to go around, they had to redesign it. I mean, it cost me almost $30,000 dealing with the state in my front yard, so I'm having a real problem of some of this lining, so that's why I say, I know there's a lot of lead in this street. And if you look at past my house, I live just down right next to the fire department. And between there and the bridge, there's a lot of lead and there's ledge here. So I'm not sure what blasting would do to foundations. I have a stone foundation. And when the plow trucks go by, when Chan goes by, my house shakes. So what's that gonna do to stone foundations and stuff when you're doing blasting? So these are some of my huge concerns. My house is almost 200 years old.
Concerned because they haven't figured out about the ledge, is that your
No, I
concern?
mean, if the blasting, if they have to blast, which I know is gonna be blasted. I'm not sure how they're gonna route or how they're gonna do that.
I think their problem, I can say a little bit more because I've had to live through that. There's a pretty well vetted out process for blasting for trenches during construction projects like this. There would be a contractor who like main blasting was the one that I've dealt with, who there's a whole process. If you want pictures taken of your interior beforehand, they do that. There's a lot of communication and warning about when the blasting is gonna actually happen. If people want their water tested before, that's another thing that is sort of standard operating procedure for that kind of work. And then there's monitoring after the fact to make sure that there wasn't any impact to the foundation of the water supply.
So. Conclusion, and haven't forgot about you, Keith. I did see a hand in the back first, though, so go ahead, Cole.
Hold on. I guess my question is to kind of circle back a little bit to what you were saying. How, I mean, every year is different, but how much have we spent in the past 2 years on? Because at least in my lifetime, that's kind of been the major event, the major flooding events. And if this is going to continue, and if the climate is changing in such a way that this is going to be a reoccurring pattern, how much have we spent in the past 2 years, and how much will that add up to over the years as a how much have we spent on septic system repairs past years, and how much will that add up to over time as opposed to the initial cost for right now?
Something you guys.
Well, I know that we had all of the systems pumped out for the July 23 flood. Belinda might know the cost.
So, it was about 3,000 for the town hall, the town buildings here and the town garage. But also in about 10 years ago, our system failed at the town hall. And we had to put in this massive leach field and this massive system over there that DeMar's property is actually on their property. We had to pay for it. And I would say the cost was over 20 grand. And we did it with our own road. We had the engineer and everything. One of the things they found was a brake pipe from the bus building into the road as their stuff. So there's a possibility that this is still going on. That was 10 years ago.
I'll just add, there are several houses in the village that have been pumped several times this year. I know one house has been pumped 3 times.
Yeah, as far as the blasting goes, the blasting has an insurance company. That insurance company will come in your house, videotape every inch of your house before anybody blasts. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. And they won't be using very big blasts anyways. So I don't think the blasting will be a problem personally. And I guess if I lived on the street, I'd be concerned too. But I think they'll handle it. And I look at this as everybody in the village is going to get a new septic tank for the pump, drain pump, whatever it is. I'm not sure what they're going to install. And then they're going to lose their leach field. They won't have the responsibility of their leach field anymore. It'll be up there. To me, if I lived in the village, it'd be a no-brainer for me, but I don't live here. I used to live here on the corner when I was a kid. And I'd say there's about like 15 to 20 houses on Route 15 that aren't there anymore since I was a kid. So how much revenue could that bring back to the town? What would 15 houses do to Wolcott town? Yeah. So
Personally, I think it's a no-brainer.
That's my opinion. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lucian. Spencer?
I'm Lou Riccadello. And my concern right now, it's not the engineering aspect of train that. I've done a lot of studying on the driving thing. And one thing is that recently, they've done research on wastewater. One of the things that bothers me is that if you don't get this system, this is a problem, real problem. Is that now they're saying that a good deal of COVID comes from the wastewater. They don't have the proper system to take care of that wastewater. My point is, my grandchildren, I'm not gonna be around, but you know, you have to consider the future citizens of this place. You know, I hear people talk about, what we have it in 40 years, what we have it, well, don't think of it, you know, of ourselves, our age takes care of that. But the thing is, what do we do with future generations? I know I've written in the forum, and I said, the one thing that I noticed was, and I read this a long time ago, and continued, now they finally completed it. And that was in Flint, Michigan. They had lead pipe. And lead was saying, it's dangerous, it's toxic. Well, with these grants, fortunately, they got rid of all the lead pipes. Now the kids are drinking great water as compared to being a danger from the lead pipe. That's number one. Number two is the fact that it's going to be for years to come. And I hear things and I read people write, and they say about development. I got the impression in reading that they think within the next year or two, we're going to have massive development down here. I don't think so. I think, see, that's another thing to think about. We're coming up with things that really, it leads to the experts. They're the engineers. I can't compete with what they're telling me because I don't know that much about the engineering aspect of it. But I'm more concerned of how it affects the physical aspect of the people living here. Now, I know that the effluent does go into the river. So that's part of the part that COVID comes out and says, this is a thing that we have to clean up. That's number one. Number two, as we know, every administration comes up with something. We don't know how this election will come out. So you may have the grant today, but there's no guarantee that you're going to get the grant tomorrow. Because if they all of a sudden come in and say, we're going to save money, so let's get rid of these grants. Well, we're the ones to get hurt. My third one is the fact that if you get, what is it, Linda, 5 million or so, and I think of it as getting some of my money back. That's an important thing. If I'm getting 5 million for the town, it's improving the town. I got something back for my tax. I am definitely for it because I think it's necessary. And you know, I saw what people said, well, we'll get a Starbucks. Starbucks, let's be honest, they do demographics. They want to know how many people are there, how many, what they could sell, things of this nature. If we think we're going to put up a Starbucks here, and it's going to be like a Starbucks in the mall or a Starbucks in Burlington, I mean, we dream, we hope to get that, but there's no reason why. And this is another point that I made, is that there's no reason why, let's say hypothetically, instead of a Starbucks, you get a couple of people from Wolcott say, we want to put up an ice cream stand. We put a couple of people to work, got additional tax money. It adds up to a lot of different things. Here, we're all talking about building it. How much it's going to cost? And I'm 97 years old. I cannot get a guarantee on anything.
Sure as hell can't get any insurance. The thing is that I think we have to look, not for us. That's a selfish attitude. And it isn't that I've been here a year or two, I've been here 63 years. And I've got grandchildren and great grandchildren, and they're gonna be here probably another 63 years, I hope. So I think that's the important part. We're speaking in two things. One is, and I understand, it, don't get me wrong. I'm no different than anybody else. No one loves taxes. Just listen to your politicians. One thing they bring up is taxes, but the thing is, how about the safety of the people themselves? How can we stop some of these toxic things that are around us? And they said, just think ahead. May not get the 5 million to wait. And so it's and as I say, you look at all these small towns. I'll tell you, this is a story that always could be. I lived in Nebraska for many, many years. That goes back to the 1940s. And I worked in a small town of about 400 people. Okay, farm community. And that little farm community, because everybody stuck together, was eventually given the honor of being the country that was given the honor, making them the American Town of the Year. They built a swimming pool, they built a good gym, a good school, they did a lot of these things. It's because all of the people stuck together. We're all not going to be happy over things, but it's tough to guarantee. Get a washing machine and fight for your guarantee. They'll come up with, well, what this happened, what that happened. I think the way it's laid out, I'm going by these gentlemen who know what it's all about, and I give credit to the select board because they're doing some grant. That's the only way the town should operate. We got, somebody said, well, there was, I guess, a gentleman over. It said there was 3 other buildings that he remembered. I remember we had 3 grocery stores here. We had Bucks, we had a garage, and we're always thinking of the future. And I think that's what we've got a town that's worth saving, developing. When I hear people say, oh, we're going to have developments come in, I'm leaving it up to you. The developments come in, I'm not just going to say, oh, yeah, go ahead, do where you want. We rely on our board to say to us, wait a minute, we're going to make certain restrictions. Legislative committee, the welcome party, the one, if they can do it that fast, boy, we better hire them. That's all I want.
Brian, can I just, can I just add something to it? Yep. I just wanted to add something to what Rick just mentioned. So this 4.7 million and plus the pending grants that Linda mentioned, these can only be used for this wastewater project. There are several email posts from Porch Forum posts. Why can't we use this for buyouts? Or why can't we use this to fix the roads? This can only be used for this wastewater project. And there's a tight timeline here. And this has to be, the money has to be spent, the project has to be complete by 2026. This money will go to another town for a wastewater project. We got more money because another town voted it down by 30 votes. That's how important your vote is. Just think about that.
We keep having forgotten.
See again?
No, I just want to make sure keep note we haven't forgotten about it. So go ahead.
Okay, Lee Roberts, and I'm wondering where the numbers come from for the annual maintenance. And I know that the preliminary engineering report was about 60,000, I think, annually for the system, and then it was divided by 75 users, and I think that I don't know if that, so
is that number annual costs still roughly the same, and how many
So
people?
it's up here, Lee, oh, that's the next one. No, the 3 to 6 per 100. That one.
He's asking about how we derive operation and maintenance budget and if that's gonna change and what goes into it. That,
Yes, does the number from the preliminary report still sort of hold, or like 60,000 or 75, what do we now?
yeah, I think
Just under 60, it's 50
Yeah.
something.
I think that what is in the preliminary engineering report projects to 2026, which is nobody would have to pay operation and maintenance if the system isn't operational yet. So that would be the first year that anybody would be paying anything for O and M. And that cost, that approximately probably 50 to 60,000 a year, and probably $26 is your contract operator, your annual inspection, septic tank pump outs, if they're needed in year one, they're probably not needed. Operating fees, electricity for the larger pump station and for dosing up at the elementary school. What am I forgetting?
Reserve fund.
Reserve fund, thank you. And some of those numbers are pretty well known, like the permit fee is by rule. Insurance, pretty well, contract operations. Within a few $1,000 probably, some of those things we don't know. The amount of the sinking fund that is gonna be set aside on an annual basis to pay for big ticket things is kind of a select board or sewer board decision. And that could decrease or it could increase. So what's in the preliminary engineering report is our best estimate at about a year ago now of what we expect that maintenance cost to be in budget.
And is the 75 users still full? That was what was in the preliminary report. How many people are hooking up to the system?
So the 75 is an unfortunate engineering term, equivalent residential users. And so what that is taking the design flow for the system, which is a little north of $19,000, and dividing it by an equivalent residential unit of about 245 gallons a day. A single family residence or a 2-bedroom apartment unit is going to get that 245 gallons, but at someplace like the town office that probably uses, we're flushing the toilet a lot today. So, but it is permitted for a little over 1,000 gallons a day. So that's more like 4 equivalent residential users. That's where that 75 number comes from. There's just to move on to the next likely question is I think we have 32 residential properties and 13 commercial municipal properties that are potentially connecting to within the service area in the village.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, how is the system designed? Like how many users is it designed for? And is there any reserve capacity in the leach field? I can imagine there are a lot of other properties that can potentially benefit from looking into this at some point. And if we do, bring in new development, new businesses, we might need more capacity. I'm just curious about what the planning was around that.
So there's about 10 to 15% reserve, so not a huge reserve, but enough to allow property to have some flexibility in what they can do currently. It is designed also, and we will be permitting to have an advanced treatment add-on to the system. The town in the future could decide if they just demand on the wastewater. They could work to either take out a loan or find additional grant money to pretty easily add this advanced treatment, likely at the Mount Forest parcel, which would probably add roughly another 8 to 10,000 gallons.
So. Before we get into people who've already asked questions, and if it's anyone online that has questions, I haven't seen any hands go up there, or just want to offer the opportunity. Going once. Please, all right, so Keith, you're gonna. Hey, go ahead.
Hey, yeah, so I was, so I'm the one that started this petition. Basically what I was thinking at first was that we shouldn't be investing in a flood zone. And through the course of the summer, learning that most people in this town didn't even know about it. We had a 16% turnout. The price is going up. And they talked about the minimal, amount per 100,000 with no bond. But if you look at option 4, which they agreed on, if we use that full bond, it's $36 per 100,000. So why didn't you guys bring that up? And if you had option 2, it would have been $400 for commercial properties instead of $164. And with that full bond, it would have only been $14 for the people of Wolcott. So why are you charging everyone in the town more? So MSI and the Hershacks and all those people don't have to pay as much.
Can someone answer how you came to the
I
number?
don't really
I
understand.
think,
It's a letter to you guys addressed from the Wolcott County Planning Commission of May 13th of this year. It's on the town website.
I'm not sure what he's talking about, but we do not have any capital costs with this project. You might have been looking at the alternatives before we had the additional 1.4 million. When we had the original bond vote article question that we talked about that we cannot change because of the petition laws not allowing the town to change the article. We're stuck with that borrowing money because of the petition. And that's what's required by state law. So that number, the $1.1 million in the article, is before we receive the $1.4 million. So the alternatives are based on the original amount before the grant amount. So that's I think that's what you're talking about. The only cost to taxpayers that are not in the village is that $3 to $6 per $100,000 assessed value. And if folks not sure what that means, if you have a $100,000 assessed home, you would pay $3 to $6 per year extra, $3 to $6 per year, not per month, not per week, per year. 200,000, you double that, $6 to $12, and so on.
So there was someone in the middle here that had raised a hand. Go ahead.
Sheila Halpin, I'm just wondering what happens after next Tuesday if the vote passes? People come back and ask for something else, and if the vote goes down, people still argue it, or are we done?
You can't bring back the bond vote per year, so.
So if it were to pass on the next vote, what's your next steps?
Continue on.
If it doesn't pass, what are the next step?
Stay in the water.
Wait, so that's okay. All right, so hang on a second. So Keith, you've been very patient. I appreciate that. What was your question?
A question is back at the leach field, and I asked the question at the select board meeting the other night, and I think the answer I got was when we're looking into it, what is the proximity of this leach field up there to the school water system and to the water systems of the houses around there? And you know, I'm assuming that there's a substantial liability to the people that live near there. Also, is the school going to be part of this leach field? Or is it just going to be a dumping ground for the village?
So can you answer the question as far as relevance to wastewater, to the water system?
Sure. Well, first off, we're going through a very extensive permitting process. In addition to that, we agreed with the school to bring in a water supply hydrogeologist who's going to be studying specifically the school water supply and providing kind of his analysis and ensuring that we're protecting that.
We're gonna tie the schools, is the school going to be tied into the?
The school actually has a very large, oversized system. That is operational, so instead of using up the capacity that we had in this field, we left that separate.
Okay, so basically this is just gonna be a dumping ground for the village.
I just have to clarify here. We have the state of Vermont on Zoom right now. They are funding this project. They are overseeing the permitting of this project. There are stringent measures in ensure as far as setbacks from not only school well to private wells and how this thing is built. Each individual resident and commercial business in the village has their own septic tank to hold the solids. The only thing that's going in the pipe are the liquids. And this is being overseen by the state and their indirect discharge program. It is a very stringent program. The school board did their due diligence. We met with them several times. We had a public meeting. They said that they would vote in favor of this school board if it voted at the school public meeting. The school public meeting overwhelmingly voted in favor of this. We had all the experts up there to reassure the school and the principal that the safety of the students and the school were the utmost importance. So this is not a dumping ground. So I just beg to differ with your attorney.
I'm very aware of what the state requirements are for septic system. I just went through it myself. I've got $4,000 personal money into just a permit. So I know what's involved, okay? But I still see this, you know, there's other places around town, if you're willing to look and take the time. That would be.
Hang on one second. So we are closing in on 7:30.
It's just they need to.
Oh, yeah.
Assembly from DEC.
So I just want to make sure we recognize. Yeah. So Emily, can you speak relevant to that last question?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out the difference between a typical permit for a home versus this system. They are two different programs. And so I just wanted to point that out, that the requirements that this system is under is more stringent than the wastewater permits that a homeowner would go under. So I just wanted to point that out as the difference between the two permits that people would see.
Thank you, Emily. So Bill, I know you had raised your hand at one point. Is it a question or a comment? Because I want to make sure we have a chance to answer have questions answered. Or... I'm fine. Okay. Question or comment? Okay.
How many confirmed businesses or residents are already going to be on this system? I'm not saying the whole town, how many confirmed businesses or structures? But now,
Look, if I confirm.
I would say
how many
zero.
people have already said they would be on this system?
Zero, because we haven't asked any.
So you're putting the cart before the horse again.
At least. There's, so Kurt, there's going to be a septic ordinance that this committee has been working on that will be finalized and sent to the select board for approval, which will determine the rules and regulations and the service fees that will be for the people that are hooked up. So the conditions, the opt-out measures, the service fees for the commercial, for the municipal, and for the residential, all of that will be done as part of the septic ordinance, which will be ultimately approved by the select. So we can't give you a number of how many people are going to be hooked up, because we also have FEMA buyouts in town, or some of them are not yet decided. We also have an opt-out option for residents in the village that can meet our criteria for not hooking up to the system. Maybe like the gentleman over here who just put in a new system. As an example, I'm not saying that for sure because I don't know enough about your system. But so there's going to be some opt-out options and there's going to be further buyouts. So we don't know what the number will be until the septic ordinance is finalized, until we know how many buyouts and we know how many opt-outs.
I think if you're gonna do an ordinance, it should be the whole town deciding, not 5 people.
To me, that's.
There's a process to get ordinances
Yeah.
passed, so that's not just by
State
people.
law, we follow state law.
Gwen, comment or question?
Yeah, it just was sort of a procedural question. So we're voting on this money, which we don't actually have to borrow. Do we have to borrow it if we vote? Yes. So we just don't borrow it and continue with the project because it's funded otherwise.
Yes.
Well, the warning also is giving us permission to move forward.
But yes, no, you don't have to borrow the money if that gets quoted because it's already paid for. So that's just a backup that was built in ahead of time.
Any assurances about that?
Say again?
Any assurances about not getting bond money? That is, a lot of this discussion is based on the fact, well, needed it. And that's a great circumstance, but the question I have is what, other than someone said something at a meeting, is there any assurance that we will not use it?
We've signed documents with the grants. We've signed documents with the grants. I have them in my office.
Saying that the grant money is there.
Yes.
That way it
they
won't
have
rely
offered
on.
us the grant. One of them alone is in $2.6 million.
I'm sorry, I meant bond. I meant the bond money. Is there any
There
assurance?
is no bond money because the grants have come in, so we don't have to bond.
So we can be assured that we will not need to issue a bond.
That is correct, yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Relevant to wastewater.
Not prepared, he had one to that.
Mike, did you have something still? So I know there are.
We won't need that bond, but
Mike, hold on a second. You're gonna wait just a second. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I just want to be crystal clear. Are we voting on bond money? But even if we all vote yes, we don't borrow the bond money? It just sounds like there's just a lot of questions.
Yep.
On what else.
Can someone give an affirmative verbally on that? Like, see heads shaking yes, but like,
The article question as it is now, because we've been changing this.
Right.
Can the town design and build this system, and if and only if necessary, borrow up to that amount of money after all the grant money is spent? But that was before we found out we had ample money plus a 30% contingency buffer built in, plus we have another 1.6 million pending in addition to that, we're hoping that we're going to secure as well. I just wanted to thank the Vermont Regional Planning Commission because they have gotten us all of this grant money, and the town, the select board have gotten all of this money, working hard, so we don't have to pay for this.
Right, that's what I thought.
Yeah, but so what we are voting for is, can the town design and continue to build this? And it was voted yes already, and we're just asking that again because of the petition.
so.
Thank you.
So, Mike, Thomas, you had a quick question?
yeah, so how can we be assured that we're not going to use the $1.1 million bond? What if this goes over cost, like most of these projects usually do, especially over 2 years?
So the answer to that is, it would have to be over the 4.7 million that's already awarded to us. The additional 1.6 that is potentially going to be awarded to us and has signs that is likely to come to us. And still then need to borrow an additional 1.4. So we've got a 30% contingency plus an overfund of a potential 1.6 million if we receive those grants. And then we would allow the town potentially to borrow 1.1 or 1.4. I think it's 1.465.
There's no
Over
need.
that. Thank you, Mike. Construction would have to be horribly mismanaged or poorly designed in order for that amount of overage. Thank you. So we are at just past 7:30. I know. Hang on one second. You guys.
Before we leave, I just for one, as a citizen, would like to thank these people up here for the work they've done. I'd like to thank Linda particularly because Linda single-handedly, in many cases, has been the point person for this town with FEMA, along with Lucian and Linda. I mean, this town has no idea how much money they have been able to get this town for North Wolcott, for Town Hill Road, for East Hill Road, for Flatiron Road. I mean, the work that they've done beyond normalcy. Yeah, for $500 a year, You know, you people ought to be thanking them and not questioning them at every turn of the road.
Does have actual business they need to do tonight. Thank you guys for participating and asking questions and being patient. You guys.